Are you looking to grow revenues, increase profitability, or obtain financing? If so, you came to the right place.
Running a business is all about leadership. How do you become a better leader? Learn from the successful entrepreneurs and business owners how to lead your organization more effectively. That's why we created Leadership Live at 805, Talking Small Business, to help you succeed with your host, Andrew Frazier, Business Growth Pro and CFO and founder of the Small Business Pro University. Every Tuesday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern, we're joined by experienced entrepreneurs and business owners who share their secrets to success via live stream. Also, every Friday morning, we release a new podcast episode. Either way, you will learn about developing your business leadership skills from our roster of highly performing guest experts. Leadership Live is one of the many valuable resources provided through the Small Business Pro University, empowering business owners to learn, profit, and grow. Find out more at sbprou.com.
Good evening and welcome back to Leadership Live at 805. I'm your host, Andrew Frazier, and excited to hang out with you one more Tuesday evening or on the replay if you didn't make it live. But, this week, we're really going to be talking about an important topic. I always say that your business can only go as far as you're prepared to lead it. So it's important for you to be able to develop your leadership skills so that you can lead your business further and take it to the highest level possible. So today we're going to be talking about specifically leadership and, very important leadership skill that many business owners struggle to be able to do successfully. So really excited about it. We're talking about coaching more and managing less. So there's a certain stage in your business. You probably remember I talk about my Masterpreneur playbook, and there's a certain stages in your business. So as you may remember, there's 5 steps to going from startup to scaling your business. And also, you as a leader, you have to evolve through 5 different roles. So as your business grows, you have a different role with different responsibilities and different skills needed to execute it effectively. It's the challenge to go from step 2 to step 3, working in your business to working on your business, but it's also a huge challenge to go from step 3 to step 4, where you're really going from being a manager to being an executive. And that's where, coaching is so important. So that's what we're going to be focusing on tonight. So my guest this evening is Stan Gibson. We're going to be talking about, how to coach more effectively and how to, coach in a way that your managers can manage more successfully and bring greater results for your business. So Stan has a lot of experience and really draws from his experience as a business owner, as well as, through athletics, through teams, extracurricular activities build leadership skills. So let me invite Stan on, and then we'll get started talking small business. Hey, Stan, how are you doing this evening?
Leadership Live at 805. I love that. That's got a great ring to it, Andrew.
Yeah, no, definitely. Just like if the glove doesn't fit, you must have quit.
Well, whether it's 705, 605, which it is for me, or 805, I'm excited, blessed to be with you, my man. So this ought to be fun.
Yeah, no, definitely. So yeah, we're going to be chatting about a lot of stuff, but you've got some, great experience. We had a chance to chat, so I got a chance to, get to know a little bit about you. Hey, what's up, Randy? And we'll have comments and other things throughout the session, but before we get started, you're new to my audience. So if you could take a few minutes, talk a little bit about your journey, how you got to where you are now and, explain a few of the key milestones that led you to where you are. And then we'll dig in and talk really about, what is this coaching thing and what does it really mean? And, how can I do it more successfully? Sound good?
That sounds awesome. Thanks, Andrew. I'd love to do that. And I tell you, I'm really excited about the format. I'm on a lot of podcasts, but rarely do I have people, putting in their questions and their chat. And so I'm really excited about that because I love the live experience. And, this is a learn and grow hour for all of us. So I'm excited. I'll tell you a little bit about kind of where I started. I'm a Midwest boy. And, grew up in Illinois and out on the farm, really. For those of you, I'll date myself, but I mean, between baling hay, walking beans, detasseling corn. I mean, I grew up knowing what work meant. And, the nice thing is, met my wife in our small town. We actually have known each other since third grade. So we're going on 42 years of marriage. So there's not a lot of secrets. Our mothers are best friends. So we've got really kind of a story, just a fable that between the two of us. And I'm just blessed to have her in my life. But we grew up in the Midwest, Andrew. And, once I played all the sports. I just love sports. I mean, I played everything there was and, had some success, in high school. And so, high school was ending up. And the reason I'm going with this is because my next set of experiences, Andrew, in college football shaped a lot of my business philosophies. I was recruited to go play football at Eastern Illinois University. I was what was called a preferred walk-on. If you don't know what that is, that's basically somebody that puts in almost twice as much sweat as the guys that are getting their education paid for. And but it was an opportunity. And when I got recruited by Eastern Illinois, I was excited to play because I thought this team was really going to be on the rise. I was hosted when I went there, and I was recruited by a gentleman that was drafted in the third round by the Pittsburgh Steelers. So they had some talent. They had some guys. I was really excited about this. And so I get there, and I'm expecting a lot of great things and had a great freshman year. But, the varsity, these guys are all talented, very talented. They lose the first game. They lose the second game. They lose every game, Andrew, the entire year, up until the very last game. They go 1-10. Now, you don't keep your job in college athletics if you obviously go 1-10. So they brought in a new coach, and this is where the story really begins, everybody. They brought in a coach by the name of Daryl Mudra. He was also known as Dr. Victory. Now, I don't know about you, but I'd love to be called Dr. Victory. I mean, what a great ring that's got to it. But he came in and, he assembled us all in this sweaty, smelly weight room. And all of us guys are sitting around coming off of a very poor year. And he was very honest with us. And it was that authenticity that struck me. And he said, gentlemen, I'm going to tell you something right now. He said, I know very little about football. The most success I've ever had was coaching my grandson in a Pop Warner League. And we won the city championship. But yet this guy's name is Dr. Victory. And in fact, he was just coming from Florida State University. And the amazing thing about this story is he was so authentic. And not only did he say, I know very little about football, he said, in fact, I'm going to be coaching from the press box because I can't see real well when I'm down on the field. But I'm going to surround you with some really good coaches. So the first thing he did was he had authenticity. He knew who he was and who he wasn't. And I believe that very strongly when I work with clients today. We're going to go through some tremendous self-awareness. We're going to know who you are, who you're not, and we're going to bring some authenticity to the table because that's what a leader does. The second thing he did is he said, you know what? I'm going to surround you with some really good coaches. I mean, they're going to be the ones that are going to develop you. And he did. In fact, for those of you that are football fans out there, one of the coaches that he brought on only weeks after was a guy that had just played at Eastern Illinois University just a couple of years earlier by the name of Mike Shanahan. Now, if you know who Mike Shanahan is, he's got 3 Super Bowl rings. He was 25 years old at the time. And we had a coaching staff that Mike Shanahan was not really probably the most special coach on that staff. But he surrounded us with good people. He knew how to identify good people. Again, when I work with a lot of leaders, we talk about having your own board of directors. When I say board of directors, we have, we've got organizations worth billions of dollars, and they all have boards of directors. And the boards of directors, basically, they bring in the brightest and the best from every different aspect of the business to basically not tell them what they know, tell them what they don't know. And so I'm a big believer in having a full board of directors. I mean, you're one of the most expensive assets on the face of the planet. You should have your own board of directors. That goes from your medical team, your doctors, that goes to your financial advisor, that goes to your mentors, that goes to your accountability partners, that goes to every area of your life. So when he was telling us, I'm going to surround you with the best, he absolutely did. And I want to get to the punchline, because we not only went 1-10 the year before, that very next year when he brought this coaching staff in and he incorporated a lot of these principles, we won the national championship. I mean, we went from worst to first in 1 year, in 12 months. And so there was a lot to be learned there. And the next thing that he said, I'll never forget it in that room, was he said, the real coaches, though, guys, are each of you. Because when you're on the field, you know if you're getting whooped, and you know if you're whooping the guy across from you. You know what schemes they're running. We don't know. So the more you're able to go ahead and tell us what's going on, we can make in-game adjustments. And when we started to do that, you could just see that he put a lot of the responsibility on us. And that was accountability that we needed. Now, I redshirted that sophomore year. I'll be very honest, but I got a bird's eye view, on front row seat, really, to watching this. And you could just see the success coming. And I'll tell you one of the things he did. When I told you I came in as a freshman, we had an awesome team. The talent on that team was really good, and they went 1-10. The next year, winning the national championship was basically the exact same players. But what did they do? They moved him around. They got him in the right swim lane. Quarterback moved out to wide receiver. They moved a linebacker to an edge rusher, which meant that he didn't have to think as much, and he became All-American. They moved guys around. Tight ends became offensive linemen, so they moved people around. And that's the next principle that I know that I work with a lot of people on. Again, it goes back to self-awareness. We got to find the swim lane that makes you the Michael Phelps of that swim lane and everybody else on the team. Because when you're in the right swim lane, it's not going to work. It's having fun. So, those were a lot of the principles that kind of came about. And I'll tell you a little bit, Eastern Illinois University, if you haven't heard of it, it wasn't too long after that. You talk about a legacy. Not only did we have Mike Shanahan as our coach, but some of you have heard of Tony Romo. You've heard of Jimmy Garoppolo. You've heard of Sean Payton, all quarterbacks. Brad Childress, who was head coach at Minnesota Vikings. Brad Pace, who is the general manager for the Bears. I mean, I could go on, but that legacy was created because of that one man. And that's what happens when you start to be authentic and you start to bring and surround yourself with the right people. So that was a great experience. And that's kind of what launched me, Andrew, into having some business philosophies that have stayed with me for life.
Okay. No, I mean, definitely, a lot of times they say, you learned everything you need to know in life, in kindergarten or when you're young. And, seeing and experiencing good leadership, it can be life-changing. And I think not only on the field, but just in the lives of the players that were there. I think that's excellent. I know you being from the Midwest, have an early strong work ethic. I started my first business in 4th grade as a paper route in Pittsburgh, so we're like in the middle of the East and Midwest. But there's something to be said for that, because you learn a lot by working and doing different things, and if you start early, you move that much further and faster. So. You got 43 years of marriage, which is outstanding. Very, not a lot of people actually have more years than me, because I've got 31. So you win that one.
I'm pretty blessed. I'm blessed. I know it. I'm married up.
You talked about surrounding yourselves with the best, and and just how leadership can make a huge difference. So we're going to dig into that, throughout the rest of the hour, but we're going to take a short break and just, we do this through the Small Business Pro University. This is one of our initiatives to help entrepreneurs and business owners be more successful. So I have a short video, let you know what the Small Business Pro University is about, and then we'll be back talking small business with Stan Gibson. Do you own your business or does it own you? Is your business growing and are you making enough money? As a business owner, there are so many things you need to know to become more successful. Hello, my name is Andrew Frazier, the Business Growth Pro and CFO. I created the Small Business Pro University for you. Small Business Pro University has self-paced, dynamic, multimedia learning experiences created by more than 20 instructors who are business owners just like you. Small Business Pro University will empower you to become a masterpreneur by learning the secrets to creating a successful enterprise, to go from working in your business to working on your business. Take advantage of our strategic coaching program or just simply choose the courses that you need at www.sbprou.com. We will empower you to thrive and not just survive and make more money in any business environment. All right, back at Leadership Live. I'm here with Stan Gibson. Really our topic is about coaching more, managing less. It's always good to make sure everybody's on the same page. So, what I like to start with is definitions, because then we can all be on the same page as where we're starting from and where we're going. So Stan, we're going to be talking about coaching. We're going to be talking about managing. Take a minute to define what those mean to you and in this context of what we're going to be discussing today.
Sure, Andrew. So, to me, we're, as we rise the ranks in any company, typically it's because, we performed well. I mean, we know our craft. We're pretty smart, and we've proven to other people that, we know the answers. And, when you get to, those leadership levels, people want to come to you, obviously, and they want to come to you because they've got problems. And as far as you're concerned, you're paid to answer those questions. And I think that's totally wrong. And I don't think that that's going to be sustainable, especially going forward. I have a saying that I guess I came up with about a year ago. And I said, when leaders learn to coach, employees learn to lead. I'll say that again. When leaders learn to coach, employees learn to lead. And I really believe that, the more we're able to expose ourselves and coach as leaders, and, sometimes that includes even, I can tell you that when I met with my direct reports, and I always had a pretty strong cadence, it was no more than every 2 weeks, but I met with, the people that reported to me. That time was basically their time. And the first 10 to 15 minutes, I wanted to know about them. I wanted to know what was happening in their life. And I think that that's always been off limits. And I want to even take that a step further as we talk here, because, I've got another saying, and that is that if you're not good at home, you're not good at work. And if you're not good at work, you're not good at home. So getting to know, the people that truly work with you, not for you, but with you, and being able to coach them, I think is tremendously important. And that isn't answering questions. That's really, that's listening. It's reframing. It's asking, getting to the root of the issue so that they can walk away knowing the answer. That is so much more effective, Andrew. So, that's a little bit of what I think about when I talk about leaders need to become coaches and managers need to become coaches.
Okay, excellent. So, but when we're thinking about managing, what is it? What does it mean to be a manager? So, I look at it as, in my chart, we look at, going from a manager to an executive. A lot of times, you got to evolve in your business. So a lot of people get stuck working in their business and not on it. And that's because they don't evolve to become a manager. If you don't, create systems, analyze what you're doing, optimize what you're doing, your business is only going to go so far. So if you don't develop those skills and employ them within your organization, you're not going to make it to the next level. Once you become good at managing, you hire some managers. So you're no longer the manager. So what do? Well, you're used to managing. So most business owners continue to manage and micromanage their managers. But that's not good for the organization. And that's where coaching comes in, which is a new skill that you have to develop as a leader when you have managers within your organization. So, you talk about leadership developing your coaching skills. So you've talked a little bit about that. What would you say is the most challenging part when you're helping people learn how to coach and understand how to coach, and sort of how do you move them through that challenge?
That's a good question. I'll tell you what, the thing is, I used to manage a lot of real estate in my lifetime. Yeah, and I always said managing real estate was easy. It's the people that is when the job got tough. Buildings don't talk back, or they don't have opinions, but people do. So it wasn't, I don't think my growth really came until I started managing people. And, people are unique. Everybody is unique. And, one of the first things I do, and, probably when I say one of the first things, but when I work with teams or when I work with individuals, I do start working on the well-being of the individuals, first and foremost, and we can talk about that in a little bit. But your question was around, what's probably one of the key things in managing? And I believe it's in self-awareness. I think it goes back to the football story of, authenticity and self-awareness. One of the things that we do is I strongly believe that, know who you are and know who you're not, but also make that the same aspect from a team perspective. And what I mean by that is, I don't know which assessments you use. I've used many of them, but from Myers-Briggs to DISC to Enneagram and Strength Finders. Been certified in them. And the thing to me, the one that I really lean on at the end of the day is one that's been modified out of Strength Finders. And if you're not familiar with Strength Finders, many of you are, they're probably on the call, but there's 34 attributes. And of those 34 attributes, you wake up with 5 of them every day. It's not even work, because you've got a magic formula with those 5 attributes that just make you special. And so a lot of times when I work with teams, because I think it's easier to manage, is when there is a team dynamic, again, of getting everybody into the right swim lane. And the thing about this, this Strength Finders, it's a process that we call the Genius Spark. And when we call it the Genius Spark, if you don't mind, I'll tell you a little story. Back in the 60s, NASA, they were looking for geniuses. And what they did was they basically hired Dr. George Land and said, come up with an assessment. We want the smartest, brightest people. We want creative people. We want really creative people, and we want an assessment. So Dr. George Land came up with an assessment, and he immediately gave it to 1,650 preschoolers. Well, the preschoolers just aced it. I mean, they came up with a 98% score because they were creative. Nobody told them how to act or what to do. I mean, they knew their passions, whether they wanted to be a professional baseball player, they wanted to be this. They had passion. They had creativity. He gave it to the same 1,650 kids when they turned 15 years of age, and they got an 11%. So we're stealing away a lot of people's passion, a lot of their curiosity. And so one of the things that we do with teams is we say, let's sit down. We use the Genius Spark, which is a form of Strength Finders, where we say, we want to know your strengths, but now we want to go really deep with it. We want to know who you are, who the best version that you've become. And I really believe as a manager and as a team, once you start to amass that knowledge around the makeup of the team, what everybody's swim lane is, I believe then you start to get authenticity, and you can start to have trust. Trust is the big word today. Trust is going to be one of the most highly traded commodities over the next 10 to 15 years. AI is stealing our trust. I love AI, don't get me wrong. But we don't know what to believe, what to hear. Everything is becoming very faux for us and fake. So trust is a big issue. So having that self-awareness, that team awareness, not only knowing who we are at our best, but knowing that those same strengths that make us so wonderful are the same strengths that can also, when we're under stress, give us kryptonite. And Andrew, if you and I were working together and, I was rubbing you the wrong way, the more you know about me, the more you'd realize this isn't personal. This is maybe I'm under stress. It's a conversation that you'd feel more comfortable having with me. So I really believe it comes down to people. I believe it comes down to chemistry. I think as a manager, I think it's very important that you get the team. I'm working with a global team right now. We're working on this because, again, there's a lot of distrust. And there's a lot of things right now that, bringing those conversations to the table sparks a tremendous conversation where people can start to see people as people, not as coworkers. And I really believe, as Pollyanna as that might sound, it starts with the team chemistry. And I think that that's where managers start to get their breakthrough, is when they start to learn more, not only about themselves, but about the team at the table.
Okay. No, I mean, definitely. I see some of the same things that you're talking about. Definitely relationships are critical in business and in life. And, the further your business grows and the further you go in business, it really is about your people skills. Coaching is about people skills. Scaling your business is about people skills, both internally and externally to your business. So, a lot of business owners, that hasn't been something they've focused on. So, it takes a minute to evolve. But the one good thing about small businesses is, you're small enough that you can become like a family. And, that can make a huge difference. That'll keep good people, even if you're not able to pay them as much. And all. So, so those things are key. This brings us to, culture. I think, large companies sort of understand what culture is, try and manage their culture. But culture can be a hard thing to manage. And, especially sometimes the bigger the organization, the harder it is. But, when you're thinking of culture and developing a culture, what are some of the key things to developing a culture that coaching can contribute to, or also that makes coaching more effective?
Well, it's a good question. In fact, there is a company I'm working with right now, and they're in that sweet spot that you're talking about, 25 to 30 employees. And, he's the CEO, and he's worked with the COO, and they've worked for a good year on, what they want to kind of unleash to 2x, 3x the company. And to your point, they've got all this energy around doing this. And, they just kind of splashed it out in front of the rest of the people, a few weeks ago. And there wasn't the same amount of euphoria. Because, it was, you don't get culture just because someone says, hey, now we're going to have a good culture. It takes time. One of the things I believe that, because of technology, even if you're remote, and most of us are working, we're not convening in an office anymore. We're remote and working from home and working from coffee shops and other places. But the beautiful thing about technology is it shouldn't really hinder your communication. I use Loom a lot, and I'm sure a lot of you know what Loom is, but basically it's the ability to, come in with my picture down in the lower left-hand corner and, be able to talk about, whatever it is that, I've got on the screen. I think there's all sorts of technologies. I think a lot of what I see on culture is I think that people are making decisions at the very top, and there's no consistency and there's no communication. Again, you talked about 25, small mid-cap companies. Yeah, they can turn on a dime. I think that's a sweet spot, quite honestly, to be in. I worked for Wells Fargo. We had 300,000 people. You couldn't, they always said, is it, too big to fail? They said, no, it's too big to manage. And I agree with that. I grew up in a town of 4,000 people. I thought that was all the people in the world. And then, you're introduced to, having to basically run strategy for 300,000 people. It was blowing my mind. So, culture can be a hard thing, but you have to. One thing I really believe, and this is something that I preach a lot. My keynote speeches, I do a lot of motivational speaking. I do a lot of leadership development speeches, but I talk about people-centric leadership and people-centric cultures. And I believe in people-centric cultures. I do believe that there is a lot of chemistry of trust. I believe that, again, it goes back to some of the football stories I was telling. I believe that there's a lot of inverting the organizational chart and finding out ways to work with the people at mid-management, those that are out on those, those that are, doing the actual work. They're selling the product. Those that are in the marketing and finance. Some of your best ideas are out there. And I just think that there are too many companies, especially the bigger you get, that are working at such a higher altitude that communication, that consistency, and that desire to have everybody going in the same direction, I think it's missing. One of the other things I'm talking about too, because I think it's big, and I'm making this suggestion, is I read a good book by Donald Gordon, and one of the things he said, I cannot stand mission statements. Mission statements to me, we exist to, just bores me to death. It goes up on a wall and nobody ever looks at it. But I read this and I thought this was interesting, and I would like your 2 cents on it, Andrew. To me, I'm starting to look at mission statements as, let's have something that the whole company can see. What are the 3 measurables in the next 12 to 18 months? Next 12 to 18 months. We're not talking 2, 3, 5 years out. What are 3 measurables that we want to look at that would really 2x, 3x, 5x is whatever, but what are the measurables that are most important, 2 to 3? And let's put in the mission statement not only what those are, but let's put the time frame in which we're going to accomplish them. And then let's also put in that mission statement why they're important. Are they important to the customer? Are they important to us? What's in it for every employee to know why they come into work every day? I think that's a much better way of engaging and embracing a culture, is when you bring the rest of the teams, the rest of the organization into knowing what's important, when it's going to be done by, and why it's important. I think that's a key aspect to building culture these days.
Okay. No, definitely. You mentioned communication, and at the end of the day, it's well known that if you're going to work on one type of thing to get better at, the most valuable thing is developing your communication skills and your ability to communicate. That's going to help you more in your life and more with your business than anything else. Definitely, talking about that. I think one thing that's underrated that you mentioned is consistency. It's really hard to have a culture where it's not consistent, when things are not consistent. People like to know what's going to happen or what's expected. And, Michael Gerber, writer of the E-Myth, one of his things says your business is going to be like you. So if you're sloppy and disorganized, your business is going to be sloppy and disorganized. You have to make sure, how you're impacting your business. If you come in, I've worked with clients, especially manufacturing, you come in one day, there's a return damaged. So if you're the leader and you're like, oh man, we can't be having these returns. So that whole day, everybody's focused on quality. And then you're like, man, we didn't ship everything today. So then they're like, well, we got to, that may not be that big a deal to you, but it rings through the whole organization. And, that hurts your culture. That can hurt a lot of things. And I'm sure you've seen that as well. What are some other things that you would say, can really disrupt your culture in ways that you might not think?
Maybe a little bit of my bias in history with some of the companies I've worked at, because they were kind of large, but I've got another saying too that either I heard it or I made it up. I don't know which, but I believe that organizations need to guarantee employability, not employment. We can't guarantee employment. We just can't. But employability is the ability to say, you know what, we're going to take an interest in you, in the job you have today, and the job that you may or may not have tomorrow. We don't know where you're going to be 5-6 years from now, but we're going to take an interest in you. When I was at one company, we had a team that, decided on our own just to take a look at the budgets, the training and development budgets. And they were pretty massive. They were big. I mean, there was a lot of zeros behind this. And basically at the end of the year, about 30% of it was being used. When we went through the organization and we talked to the people and we said, what's getting in the way? You're obviously you're stressed, you're burned out, but yet there's development dollars. It was the same thing. It was, either my managers never talked to me about it. I'm too busy. I don't feel like it's promoted in the organization. And, when that's the mantra that's being, floated around that, I'm kind of on an island, I'm on my own to figure it out. That doesn't really tell you that people are caring about you. And again, when I say employability, I think that when you show people you care about their development, whether you're at that company or whether they end up somewhere else, I will guarantee you, they will stay with you. There's a better chance that they're going to say, you know what, I'd rather stay, even if it's for a few dollars less, where I love the culture, I love the people, they care about me and I care about them. I think that's important. And I just, again, sometimes in a bigger firm, that's hard to do. But again, I think in smaller and mid-sized firms, I think that's probably something that you can just sit down and say, you know what, we care about you and we're going to make sure that we grow. I hope you stay here forever. But if you don't, then you know what, we want what's best for you. So I think that's one of the other areas that's missing in today's culture that hopefully people are starting to realize that that's important.
Okay. No, I mean, that definitely makes sense. Back when I used to work for other people, one thing I noticed was there's an awful lot of dead-end jobs, where, there's no future. Either you're going to stay doing the same thing for the rest of your life, or for the next 5 or 10 years. And, if you're not doing new things, you don't learn. So that reduces your employability, your ability to even go somewhere else. So definitely helping organizations to do that is key. One of the things you talked about earlier was, measures, and I'm a big fan of KPIs and really work with organizations to sort of develop the right ones so you can measure. And, developing KPIs and measuring is sort of like manager level stuff, but things you need to put in place if you're going to grow. And, what have you found difficult to when you're trying to get people to do KPIs? And also, what are some best practices around, when you're going to work with people and measuring stuff? How do they figure out, what to measure or how to do that?
Yeah, I think the measurement, it's, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. I think every company is probably going to be a little bit different. And that's why I said, I think you need to be looking at metrics in your mission statement every 12 to 18 months. And I think it needs to be fluid like that, because what's important today may not be important 2 to 3 years from now. So I think that's important. I think as metrics go, you said it a while ago, and you're just absolutely spot on, Andrew. So many people, it's a busy, crazy world we live in. And, they're working in the business versus working on the business. And, once they step back and start to work on the business and they start to carve out the time. And sometimes that's, when I work with, leaders, executives, it's time management. Because again, if we kind of get in and start, answering emails, well, all of a sudden it's 4 o'clock and you're still answering emails. I believe in some very, very strong, day batching as far as what's Monday used for, what's Tuesday, what's Wednesday. There are certain times in the day that I think you work on the business, other parts of the day you work in the business. But as it gets to metrics, I think that, I've got a client right now that, basically, has been so interested in so many different things that all of a sudden, realized that margins are about 3 or 4% off of where they need to be. I had no idea, and just thought everybody else was, had the same interest in the same metrics that he did. And so come to find out, it's no. I said, you've got to drive. You've got to drive, a key concept. If return on investments is important, then return on investments is important. If sales, hitting a certain sales figures is important, then that's fine. But the one thing I also think is once you define what those 2 or 3 are, and I don't believe, Andrew, and I'd love to hear your take on it. I don't like too many metrics. I think, you can just get lost. And, there's actually, there's a philosophy that I follow. It's called straight line leadership. And what that is basically, leaders come in either they're circular, meaning they just go around in circles and they really don't get much done, or they zigzag. They kind of, they go down the road for about, 4 or 5 months on a topic. And then, they find the other, something that's more interesting and sexy. And then they go they just zigzag. They don't ever get anywhere they want to go. But going in a straight line, being a straight line type leader, where you say it's going to be actionable, we're going to have 1, 2, maybe 3 metrics, and we're also going to develop a compensation system where everybody sees what their role is in being able to deliver on those key metrics, because everybody does. Everybody's got, even if you're in, whether you're in finance, whether you're in human resources, I mean, you can somehow work with those people to figure out how they are contributing to those metrics. So I think that's the big thing for me, Andrew. I just don't believe in having too many metrics. I think it gets very confusing. And I also think that it does need to be fluid every 12 to 18 months and, keep things fresh and keep everybody engaged.
Okay. No, I mean, I definitely, that makes sense. I would almost say, I look at, having people do a top 3. So that's sort of like the strategies you're talking about. But, I subscribe to, you need to measure everything. So, you have top 3 things that the organization's doing, but, you need to have, like, once your organization gets to a certain size, you can only manage by the numbers. So if you don't have any numbers, you can't really manage, you can't lead, you can't see how you're doing, because there's just too much of an organization that you can't be there. And a lot of times that's why a lot of owners or executives micromanage people, because they need access to the information so they can do their job. And so they can feel comfortable that other people are doing their job.
Right.
So it's definitely you have to create direction for the organization, but also when you're managing, and on the management side, you got to manage everything. One thing that was key metric we did with the manufacturing company was, like, we met every week, and we're like, okay, we need to know what inventory we have on our most important stuff,
Product,
because
yeah.
they'd be running out of stuff.
Right.
But once we put it on the metrics and looked at every week, never a problem. So when you get stuff that gets measured gets done.
What gets measured gets managed. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Andrew. Absolutely right.
Yep. So I don't know if you subscribe to OKRs, but I think that drives it. Andy Grove's system that really catapulted Intel to the next level, and they focused on every single person in the company has 3 things that they're responsible for and measured against, and everybody's 3 things roll up into the CEO's 3 things. So everything should be supported all the way down. And also everybody in the organization can see everybody else's three things.
That's powerful.
So, it really helped, even in large organizations that helps, but helping people focus is key. So now you talked earlier about meetings and sort of how you set up meetings. And, I think for a lot of smaller organizations, even bigger organizations, sometimes it's a little bit too informal to actually than it should be, in terms of maybe not having official meetings, or I talk to them every day, but sometimes that's not the same thing as having a meeting. And I usually sort of set up certain cadence of meetings and activities that managers should go through, and also I don't know how you guide people on that, or how you sort of do it yourself in terms of meeting with your team as a group, meeting with your team as individuals, and other things. Is there a consistent strategy, or it sort of depends on the situation?
Well, I would say that, I had a consistent strategy. Again, I mentioned, if somebody reported to me, I wanted to make sure that, sure, we're going to be talking on a regular basis, but I want to sit at least no less than twice a month, every 2 weeks, and I want to just for 45 minutes, I just hey, I want to know how they're doing. But then it goes into coaching. It goes into what can I be doing to help you? What are the two biggest things on your plate? How can we go ahead and start to, is there anything that we can do as an organization to make your job easier? I mean, it can go a lot of different directions, but, having that meeting with that director is really important. But I'll tell you what's even more important to me was, I had people that were then, sometimes I'm losing the name of it, but I think it's a skip. They call it a skip something. But for me, it was a 2 down or a 3 down. I had people that, were 2 or 3 levels down from me. But, I had them on a meeting cadence too. It might be every 30 days. It might be every 45 days, depending on the situation. But, I think the higher you go as a leader, you can't get disconnected with people throughout the organization. I think it's just absolutely critical. I have a guy that I know that was a nuclear engineer. Skip level. Thank you very much. I have a guy that, he was an executive at a nuclear plant, and he was an executive, but yet he was up at 4:30 every morning. He was out on the plant floor with the guys that, were making things happen. He got so much respect because he knew what was going on. There was really no secrets as far as if there were problems on the plant, and it helped elevate him because everybody wanted to see him. Who gets up at 4:30 in the morning to go have coffee with their people? And so I just thought that was such a tremendous lesson when he talked to me about that. So that's one thing that I see. I do see having meetings, consistency, a good cadence. Where it isn't just business, it's also personal. And then I always made sure that we had quarterly meetings. So when I say quarterly meetings, I mean, we took a lot of time and effort into what I called stop, start, continue. And we would spend a half a day to 3/4 of the day. What do we need to stop doing? What is it? Are there meetings that we have just put on the calendar and they just have no juice to them? What do we need to stop doing? What do we need to start doing? Is there something that, we've got a new initiative, we've got, certain dynamics that weren't apparent the last quarter? What do we need to start doing? And then what are we doing well? What do we need to continue doing? So I always had stop, start, continue meetings. And, I broke up the day because I would then bring somebody else in from another department. I would bring somebody in from finance or from tax or even a client. And, just getting, we don't stop often enough from running the job itself to sit back and that dialogue, especially in this time of, where a lot of us are remote, that time on that quarterly basis was something we started to look forward to. And so I believe that that's important. I do have a concern with too many meetings. I think that, again, making your meetings 45 minutes versus an hour or 25 minutes versus 30 minutes, just sending that signal that, we're not sitting here to talk just to talk. I can tell you, I was a professional meeting attender, in my last company. And it just wears you down because you don't have time to do any work. And then all of a sudden you're caught working at night, you're caught working on the weekends. And that is just, that just doesn't, again, when I go back to if things aren't well at work, they're not going to go well at home. If they're not well at home, they're not going to go well at work. You've got to manage and use your time. So I'm also big with my clients on productivity, on day batching. What's the best day to do certain tasks? What's the best hours when you're in kind of red, yellow, green? When do you look at emails so that you don't get death by email? Typically 3 times a day for 30 minutes. How do you manage your week, your day, your month? I'm big into personally, I love my coffee time just for myself on Saturday morning. That's when I take a look at the week behind. I take a look at the week after. I take a look at the month ahead. I take a look at the quarter ahead. It only takes me about 45 minutes to an hour, but I have to be on top of what I'm doing so that I can manage my time and others better.
Okay. No, that makes a lot of sense. I spent, some time in the military, and in the military, you see all kinds of stuff. You see the greatest examples of leadership, and you see some terrible examples of leadership. So, was able, it was an education in itself. And also you get, as an officer, you get a lot of responsibility, at a very young age, and you have to manage people. So, the good thing is you get some trial and error, so you can learn things, on their dime. And, but, I found that, I was able to do something similar, when I came in, our supply department was like one of the worst in the squadrons. And, when we left, we were number 1 out of 14 ships. And, but it took getting to know your people, working side by side with your people, building a knowledge of understanding, what they're doing. And, being able to, communicate with them enough so that if things come up, about them, even if they're little. Because a lot of times people, if you're not accessible, then, things will fall through the cracks. One of the things they called it was management by walking around. I'm not sure if that's something that, but it can be a kind of, great tool to be able to lead and manage better. So, so really, in your experience, with, well, actually, first off, we're getting close to the end. So it goes really fast, and we really just scratch the surface of, the concepts that we're talking about. But, when you're thinking about growing becoming a better coach, or even developing into a coach, so to really lead your organization that way, what are some, additional things that you should be thinking about, or what are some resources that you can go to learn? Definitely reading. I don't know if you have some books that you recommend, or other things that people can use to really develop their skills in this area.
Yeah, and I'm going to probably speed date on you here for a little bit because I know we're getting short on time. But you said you talked about something, and that's again, we talked about the people. I wrote a book called Living a Rich and Intentional Life, and never let a good pandemic go to waste. I had I used every spare moment I had during the pandemic to put together my thoughts. I'd been doing a lot of motivational speaking for the last 10 years, and people always said you ought to write a book. And so, I used that year to write, Living a Rich and Intentional Life. And a lot of it is about the well-being. It's around the science, the neuroscience, the physiological science, around sleep, around nutrition, around exercise, around productivity, around hydration, around essentialism. I believe very strongly, and that's kind of the uniqueness around my leadership and my coaching and my executive practice in consulting with teams, is coming in and helping people get their energy back. Because right now, people are just gassed. They are tired. And, it's hard to keep up at work. And I truly believe, I work with people on morning routines. I'm very much a stickler that you have to be a little selfish as a leader to be extremely selfless and to be a servant leader. And what I mean by that is you need to take that first hour of the morning, and that needs to be you, mind, body, and soul. You need to be working on you. And the best example I have is that 5 years ago, my wife was diagnosed with cancer. And when she was, all the emotions went through our mind. And I was managing a $2 billion real estate portfolio. I had a lot of things on my mind, but my wife became first and foremost. And when that happens, it really came back to me, a term that I use. I say doubling down on you. Because when I started doubling down on me, and I said, you know what? If I take care of myself, if I'm up at 5 o'clock, and you don't have to get up at 5, you can get up at whatever time. But if I was up taking care of me for the first hour 15 minutes, that meant I was in the best shape to take care of my wife, my family obligations, my work obligations, and everybody else. And so I have a PDF that, in fact, if you'd like, I've got my website, stangibsonspeaks.com. If you want to go to the resources, I've got a free PDF. And it's got all the neuroscience and all the physiological stuff around sleep. I could talk a whole nother hour if you had it on, what are the stages of sleep and what are the routines of waking up in the morning for the first hour, and, between just making my bed, that's the first thing, between getting water with lemon, and why is that concoction a healthy concoction? What's the third thing, the fourth thing, the fifth thing? We make 35,000 decisions a day. And the most important thing to do is to put everything, or as much as you can, on routine, so that you're not wasting those decisions on things that don't need to be wasted. You have morning routines and you have evening routines. Tomorrow starts tonight. Next week starts this week. Next quarter starts this quarter. So you've got to have routines. And so when you start to work with people, when your team, I come in and work with teams around this, when you start to say, you know what, we want you to have your energy back. I don't think that's something that's ever been looked at. I think, we put a gym out there, that people don't use. I mean, the science has been done. 20% of the people, use the gym. Only the healthy people, by the way. When you start to do things on an individual basis to help people get their energy back, again, I think it goes back to they know how much you care. And when you're good at home, you're good at work. When you're good at work, you're good at home. So I believe it's a holistic approach, Andrew. And that's just how I approach leadership. And a lot of my clients, that's where we have to start, unfortunately, is getting them right before we can even get into some of the leadership issues and get into their business.
Okay. No, excellent. I definitely it starts with you as the leader. So if you can't lead or manage yourself, how are you going to lead or manage someone else? So we've covered a whole bunch of stuff, and it's been great chatting. And appreciate everybody's comments and participating as well. And really before we go, I always like to kind of get 3 key takeaways that people can hear tonight, but start utilizing tomorrow within their business to move it forward. So take a minute to sort of think about what those might be. And what I'm going to do is take a minute to share a little bit about my most recent book, The Masterpreneur Playbook, and we'll be back with Stan Gibson getting the top 3 before we close out the show. Most businesses are not growing, could be more profitable, and have cash flow issues due to lack of capital. What if you knew the secret to generating revenue, maximizing profitability, and acquiring capital when you need it? I'm Andrew Frazier, and I have developed a proven 5-step framework to take you from startup to scaling faster and easier. I laid it all out in the Masterpreneur Playbook. It's available now in both English and Spanish on Amazon, Audible, and my website, sbprou.com. Get your copy today to start selling more and making more sooner. All right, great. So I'm back with Stan Gibson. We've been talking about, really managing less and coaching more for much better results. So Stan, what are some things that, as business leaders, as entrepreneurs, we should take away from what we talked about tonight?
Well, the first one that we talked about was just the authenticity and, know who you are and know who you're not. I tell you what, I really, truly believe, Andrew, that trips up most leaders. We don't have to coach on IQ. Most people are pretty smart. They really are. They wouldn't be in the positions they're in. It's the EQ. It's the emotional intelligence. It's absolutely knowing who you are. Again, when we get into self-awareness, we have issues 3-4 months later. We can always go back to their makeup and come up with why they did what they did. And so we can pivot, we can do a lot of things, but I'm a big believer in again, step up to the plate, embrace who you are. Perception becomes reality. And sometimes people perceive, and you just have to realize there's a reality behind that. So I really think you ought to take care of yourself in knowing who you are and who you're not. I think the second thing is around, I talked a little bit about that board of directors, but that's also around relationships. Hang around the best. Hang around people like Andrew. Read his book. Know that I'll tell you what, relationships are so key personally and professionally. And I'll tell you why. I can tell you how much sleep to get, how to sleep well. I can tell you how to eat, how to exercise. I can tell you how to live a really good life and probably extend your life by 25%. But relationships, having healthy relationships at home and at work actually can extend your life by 60%. 60%. That's how important relationships are. Again, it's about a people thing. And, I think the third thing is to double down on you. I think it is. I think you got to take care of you so that you can take care. We're all under a lot of stress. If something happens to us, the world's still going to revolve. I know that. But while we're here, we've got responsibilities. We've got responsibilities at home. We've got responsibilities at work. We've got responsibilities in the community. And to be the best version of you, you have to double down on you and take yourself seriously, take your health seriously, take your relationships seriously, know who you are, know you're not, so that you can go out and give the rest of the day to everybody else as a servant leader.
Excellent. Excellent. So, authenticity and really, one of the key things for a lot of leaders is, you may say things, but definitely people take more stock into what you do. So, whatever you say is nice, but if you aren't authentic and consistent, that's not gonna work. And it might be detrimental. Relationships, at the end of the day, they're so important. And hey, I want to live 60% longer. So we'll definitely spend even more time and double down on you. You can't, do your best at leading if you can't lead yourself or you're not up to, the task. So, preparing yourself is key. So this has been great, Stan. I appreciate you hanging out with me. You definitely have a lot of experience, a lot of wisdom, and thanks for sharing it with our audiences, because, entrepreneurs and business owners, there's a lot that you need to learn. There's so much you need to know as an entrepreneur, business owner, but you can't possibly know it all. but whatever you don't know is going to hurt you. So, and there's a lot of people out there sharing things that aren't really accurate or best practices. So, being able to, hear from people who, have actually done what they're talking about instead of just maybe read about it or heard about it, makes a big difference. So thanks for bringing your knowledge, wisdom, and experience to us tonight.
Thank you, Andrew. I've enjoyed this immensely. And any questions, I'd love to hear them later. I'd love to help. But you've got a great program going. And I'm definitely, your book just became one of my newest ventures that I need to get into. So I'm looking forward to getting after that.
Okay, great. No, I appreciate it. Thank you very much. And look forward to hang out for a minute and we'll chat. And let me just close things out. So good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining in. Thanks for your questions and your comments. Dr. K, I just seeing your questions. So, business management, differentiate business and management consultant versus business coaching. So, generally I think of coaching as, you talking to people, but not doing things to help them. So you're really talking to them and helping them figure out things for yourself. But many times in business, they need consulting because they know what they need to do. They may not have the skills to do it. They may not have the team to do it. They may not have the bandwidth. So consulting is more actually hands-on doing things for the client. So that's a good way to sort of think about the difference between the two. So definitely thanks for the question. Sorry I didn't see it earlier. Thanks everybody for the comments. Hopefully this year is off to a great start for you. My goal this year is to make 2024 my best year ever, but not just that, help a lot of other people do the same. So, looking forward to doing that. If we can be assistants, assist or just, help with education or whatever else, we're glad to do that. So, so definitely keep that in mind. And, at the end of the day, the more that the faster and more successfully your business is going to grow.
Thank you for listening to Leadership Live at 8:05, Talking Small Business. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and to the podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Leadership Live is one of the many valuable resources provided through the Small Business Pro University, empowering business owners to learn, profit, and grow. Find out more at sbpro.u.com.